The honourable member for Thornhill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we're debating the 9th budget that this Prime Minister and this government have written. And if you listen to their rhetoric, you might be confused into thinking it was their first budget ever, because they seem to have forgotten just who's been in charge of this country for the last 9 years, and just who's responsible for the situation that we're in. That is that's the latest half-hearted attempt to clean up the mess that they've made while pretending it's everybody else's fault, or worse, pretending that everything's okay. Somehow that it's global, that it's still COVID-related, that it's anything but a painful addiction to spending by this Prime Minister who cannot help himself, who's lost his way in a world too complicated for his version of this idealistic post-nationalist state that he's trying to create. We know that the leadership starts at the top. And if the Prime Minister is really unhappy about the way that things are going, as we've heard him say over the last couple of weeks, then he should take it up with the guy that's been in charge. We also know that we can't ask the arsonist to put out the fire, and we can't ask Liberals, particularly Liberal politicians, to fix Liberal messes. Anything other than than this kind of gaslighting to the extreme, these ministers pretending that they can save the day with the same old tired ideas repackaged nicely with a new bow and a new communications plan, is nothing more than delusional. That's what we saw in this budget's rollout. And if you were to ask a Liberal MP or a cabinet minister to sum up the costly coalition's budget, they could probably do it in one word. In fact, we just heard it, and that word is fairness. And we heard it constantly from that side of the House, and in weird platitudes they used on TV when answering questions that had nothing to do with that word or the budget itself, or anyone daring to question their intentions as anything but bad. In fact, the word is even in the title of the budget. They call it, quote, fairness for every generation. Now, I love the idea of fairness, don't get me wrong. It was fairness and equality and of opportunity that allowed my parents to come to Canada, to work hard, to get ahead, to build a better life for me and my brother. From the front seat of a taxi to the front row of Parliament Hill, that's the story of Canada in one generation. It's the story of hard work, and a story like this is the story of so many millions of other Canadians. But we have to ask ourselves, is this budget really fair? Does this budget actually live up to the idea of fairness? And what in this budget exists that would lead them to falsely label it as such? And so when you scratch beneath the surface and you go past the marketing exercise that we've seen roll out before the budget, and you really dig deep into what the Liberal NDP government is proposing, it's clear that this budget is profoundly unfair for the people that they claim that it helps most. And so let me tell you why. First of all, this budget is unfair because it does nothing to axe the costly and ineffective carbon tax, the tax that punishes people simply because of where they live, what kind of home they own, if they can own a home at all in this country, or what they do to make a living. The commuter from Charlottetown cannot ride the subway despite what the Deputy Prime Minister thinks. A farmer from Medicine Hat has to drive a tractor to feed his family, and millions of Canadian families too. They don't have another choice. But they do have to pay the carbon tax anyhow, and that's unjust and unfair. Secondly, this budget is unfair because it continues the pattern of runaway Liberal spending, spending that drives up the cost of living and keeps interest rates artificially high. Experts have testified in this place, in fact, Liberals have said it, that over and over again, higher spending means higher inflation, means higher interest rates, means higher prices for consumers. That's what we are living in Canada. Because of this Prime Minister's spending, and in all of its budgets, spending that continues to go unchecked by a party that used to be in opposition, the NDP, in this budget, Canadian families now pay double what they used to pay for a mortgage, what they used to pay for a home, what they used to pay for the cost of rent. They pay more than $1,000 this year, more than they would have paid last year for groceries. They pay more per litre every time they're at the pump. They pay more for everything. That's why it's known as the inflation tax, and it is the fault of this government, this Liberal Prime Minister, and his NDP supporters. extra money that Canadians spend every year simply because the cost of government has driven up the cost of living. It's unfair that everyday Canadians should continue to be subjected to this tax while the government pretends like nothing's wrong. Every day here, they get up and tell you that the Canadians have never had it so good, while it keeps up its immense spending agenda. And while it ignores the pleas of almost everybody, they know, they go out into their communities. Everybody tells us the same thing. Things cost too much in Canada. I'm working harder. I can't get ahead. Those are the things that I hear in my constituency. It's the things that I hear across the country. And I would be shocked if they didn't hear the exact same thing. In fact, I've been in their ridings and I still hear that. Third, this budget is unfair because it means that $40 billion deficits and because it means that this Prime Minister's legacy as the costliest Prime Minister in history will be cemented. He has run up more debt than every Prime Minister combined before him. And who will pay for this deficit and out-of-control spending? Well, it's going to be young people. It's going to be the next generation of Canadians. They will be forced to scale back on their standard of living as they struggle under the mountain of debt that they've been left by this once Liberal Party that has turned its back on generations of Liberal consensus. And you don't have to ask me. You can ask Liberals who say the exact same thing. One of the gravest injustices is that we commit is stealing the future from those who have yet to come. And that's what this costly coalition is doing to Canadians. Have a look at our future. Today, we're paying more for interest on our debt than the federal government pays for all of Canadian health care. That's more money that is transferred to any province. Take that times even more spending, even more long-term debt, and it's a window into the fiscal reality that is going to be imposed on our children and our grandchildren, and they will have to confront it soon enough. When you dig deep into this budget, it's clear that there is unfairness all around. So it's perhaps ironic that the budget is indeed called Fairness for Every Generation. It's the perfect title from a government that tells us less is more, up is down, left is right, black is white. And when you come back to the title, Fairness for Every Generation, we see that it accomplishes none of that. Not for young people who are going to be left holding the bag for this Liberal NDP government's spending spree, not for families that will continue to suffer under the burden of higher taxes, higher inflation, higher interest rates, not for the seniors who still can't make ends meet thanks to the out-of-control costs of living they will now face with additional taxes when they retire. Fairness. It was this Prime Minister who promised Canadians that the rich would pay for all of his spending. But we know that it's been everyday Canadians that have paid for this Prime Minister's addiction to spending. They pay every single day at the grocery store, at the gas pump, their mortgage bills, and everything else. In fact, the only people that are richer after nearly 9 years of this Liberal government may very well be the rich and elite in his inner circle. The bureaucrats, the friends of the Prime Minister who give themselves bonuses, who reward failed performance, who gorge themselves on public funds, who are called to the bar here and defended by the Liberals not to answer questions. More big spending and higher taxes are going to make sure that these Ottawa insiders are going to continue just doing fine while everyone else suffers. But the Liberal fat cat's definition of fairness, I'm sure this budget is very fair. And by everyone else's definition, it falls far, far short of fairness. Here's what fairness is, Mr. Speaker. It's being able to afford the necessities like food, like heating, like housing, having a government that helps and not hinders everyday affordability through lower taxes, lower inflation, lower interest rates. It's being able to provide your family to keep the fruits of your labor, to receive good, decent wages for work, interest on your investment, return on your risk. It's being able to take those risks, hard work, and put everything on the line and be rewarded for doing so. Fairness would not be giving up on the dignity of those afflicted with addiction by giving them taxpayer-funded drugs. Fairness would be giving frontline officers what they need to protect us. Fairness would be a leader who unites this country instead of divides it. Fairness would be bringing more capital into the country and not more capital out of the country. That's what fairness would be. Fairness would be a Conservative government. We hope not to see another single budget from this Liberal NDP coalition, and we'll vote this one down.